It's the PM UX weekly sync for product analytics for May 17th, 2023. Looks like first item is review the sticky items. And Kevin, you have the first ones there.
Yeah, so I think we wanted to go through the list of current issues that were scheduled for design. The only thing I can mention was that I tend to not look at workflow design because I start from backlog or ready for design, and then I move this issue to workflow design when I'm actively working on it.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, that because I've seen like we have a bunch of like workflow design issues that I am actually not working on. So yeah, that's just one thing. If you want to start pulling UX issues, we can also look at like label backlog or ready for design because I created a bunch when I did the UX scorecard at the time.
Okay. Sure, for design. So if I can change the link to be workflow ready for design, I think that's the best indication of what's coming next. And then things that have that labeled that are in the backlog. We can also look at anything that doesn't have workflow but has UX that's in backlog. But I think that list is going to be too big to be reasonable to go through on a weekly basis. Okay, I'll switch up the link to also include the ready for design, and then we can talk through anything that is in flight that you need that we want to discuss or that needs synchronous
Okay,
discussion. Cool.
cool.
All right, I'm just going to change that now. So it looks like there is one item then in ready for design. That's the cube query rendering visualization funnel. Um, Take a look at that. I don't think we're ready to schedule that yet, though. Too many tabs.
Yeah, I think did we wanted this one for this milestone
No, I
or for later on, right? Okay.
think for later on. Yeah, I don't think it's ready to schedule yet. I think the back end stuff is done, but we're pending or holding off on the front end. So the priorities in 16.1 would be any support for a front end team to get the visualization designer dashboard stuff done. As after first customers are on the platform, then we're going to roll that work forward or release that work so that they can start to create visualizations, create custom dashboards, and add those saved visualizations to dashboards. Morning, Dennis.
Hey, wouldn't we want to schedule this in, like if it's ready for design though, so that we have what like the plan is laid out for front end to implement at a later point? Or am I misunderstanding the question?
I don't know that we have demand for the funnel stuff yet. Just thinking about looking at what else is has a design label that maybe we want to just flip over to ready for design.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So compared to everything else that we may want Kevin to look at. Okay, understood.
I think it's going to be one of the next things that we get to work on. Yes. I don't think it's the next thing. How about that?
Yeah, that makes sense. I misunderstood. If like one issue is ready for design, then I thought it was like the only one to look at.
That was I think we'll get there. I think I used the wrong label for how Kevin is using the label though when
Yeah,
I
no
added
worries.
the sticky item. So we'll get that sorted though. Now we're talking to each other again. It's great.
Yeah, I also joined late, so yeah,
All good. All
very
good.
little context.
Okay. So all right. Put this down there and update the link in sticky items. And then set up a new schedule. And then Kevin, did you want to talk through or did you have anything to discuss on the create configuration screen issue?
No, not much. I actually kind of went back to it recently because we had some back and forth in new merge request. It's like the work I did before going on holiday went into the merge request process, and then we kind of had a few stuff that I didn't necessarily accounted for that needed to be embedded into this kind of new iteration. So now I'm just kind of adding it. I don't think it's kind of a lot of work, but the only thing that I'm probably gonna ask everyone is just to kind of go through it and see if they have anything else they would like to add before we proceed. So yeah, so the change, just to clarify, is us gonna move away from having product analytics settings in the general setting page of a project, but having like a dedicated, sorry, product analytics settings page. So yeah, so that's just essentially making sure that we have the right settings there from the get-go.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is not a lot of work, I think, for now. I just need to make sure that everything is right where it needs to be, and then I can kind of pick up another issue.
So one of the wrinkles that I saw in that MR is the use instance configuration and override instance configuration. Can we do that today from a backend perspective? I guess that's more of a question for engineers on the call.
Yeah, we have the cascading like settings framework. Like
Okay.
you can override, and it does that already. I haven't reviewed that MR, so I think from a design point of view, I don't know that we want to have the control to opt in or out of overriding. But at the same time, it also just needs to be known that if you do define it at the project level, that it would override at the instance level. So it still needs guidance for the user. But I can double check that.
No worries.
Yeah, that was my main feedback while reviewing that change, is that it isn't clear to the user that these are overriding admin settings, and then also making clear that you could selectively override settings. It didn't necessarily like impact all of them, which I think we should also make sure that that's something that we want to do, because that's the current functionality of it.
Do we know, Jan, if it allows you to clear it? Like, if you just emptied out the fields, would it allow you to say, or would it be like there needs to be a value here now?
No, all values are optional.
Okay.
My feedback on it was that we could do something similar like we did for deletion protection, which cascaded down from admins, groups, and projects, where you have like a toggle to basically say, I want to use admin settings or I want to use project settings. And then when you toggle to project settings, you get the form. But else you have to like that there's more explicit language and control about which like track is enabled.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm wary of using the word cascading just because that implies that you like lock things down from that level. But I think having the same pattern where you like deliberately say like I want to use this or not, I think that's worth like implementing.
Yeah. If that's already a mechanism that exists in other areas that someone who's running self-managed is going to be used to, then yes, absolutely. Or anybody who's using GitLab.com.
Yeah, it's just for cascading. And Jan, correct me if I'm misunderstanding how it works because it's been a while. But like when you set it at a higher level, you can set like it to not be overridden at subsequent levels. And so that's why I'm being careful around cascading, where we actually want the opposite of that. Even though the UX pattern may look similar.
Cascading provides that as an option, but it's not enforced by default. It's something that you can use to bolt onto your settings. The locking, which is very handy for something like compliance, but for us less so. So it's still, if we wanted to, we could still use the framework and just like not use the locking mechanism at all. It's also not something that has to be visible to the user at all.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying.
One other question, and I added a questions to answer section to the issue description, and I'm answering them as we go, just to kind of capture this conversation. Should these settings be the group level too? Where I want all
when
of
we
the
have
projects to use the same data or use the same settings.
I think it's worth noting, but we also have to have that opens up another question of like, will we have group level dashboards, and what does that look like? And how would that differentiate itself between setting a cluster at an organizational level versus like, I just want this one to connect. So like, until we kind of go through whatever that information architecture looks like, or how we're going to be able to distinct the two, I would say, let's table it until we've had that conversation.
Yeah, I'm going to answer it with maybe later. Let's see if there's customer demand.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be, because
Yeah.
especially if you look at like value stream analytics, like obviously that operates at the group level. And I've initially said we should also look at connecting it at the group level, but the more I thought about it, like like you would want to set an instance potentially at the group level, but then what impact does it have when we have group level dashboards? It may just be where if you set it at the group level, it's going to affect both. But like that's a conversation we want to, like, I would say we all need to have a better understanding of the consequences if we make that design decision.
Yeah, I could see how an admin would want to set that at a group level, and then each of the projects is going to get their own app ID, so they can have their own dashboards, just so you don't have to go in and reset that thing up for every project, or it inherits it by default for new projects. If I want analytics by default, all I have to do is, or if it's part of the onboarding flow, then that works too. I'm setting up analytics and all of that cascades down to me.
Now you say that, and I'm going to throw another wrench at you.
Yeah.
Now think about custom dashboard repositories and how we define those configurations.
Oh, yeah.
Now you set them at the group level. Does that mean all of your projects will follow that repository, or is that specifically for group dashboards at that level? And then now that you have the two of bring your own cluster and I'm pretty sure you hate me now, but bring your own cluster and custom dashboard configurations, should those two operate the same, where you can set them at the level and it propagates down to projects, but also how do they impact the group level dashboards, and should they be consistent? Which is why it's a topic for later.
Yeah, we'll talk to customers and see if they want. All my context is based on hey, I have to set up merge trains for every single project, and I just want it to be turned on for every project in this group. So if there's if there's simple things that are always going to apply to every project under a group, let's make that easier for admins. But we have no users yet, so let's wait for users to tell us they need that before we go.
It's all potentially it's all potentially useful. I just want to avoid the case where we start implementing bring your own cluster to groups, and then that has its own impact based on how it affects like lower level, but also same level dashboards. Then I don't want us to end up like implementing custom dashboard repository for group level, and that somehow behaves differently, where the impact that it has at the same or lower levels is different than that of bringing your own cluster. So it's just more of a overarching strategic decision we have to make. And so I think that we can help you push in that direction based on what users will feel about that. But not right now.
Cool. Good discussion though. Thanks.
Yeah.
Awesome. I don't think there's anything else in sticky items then. Nothing new to schedule. We didn't have any action items from last week because we had been meeting asynchronously, so everything's pretty much been taken. Kevin, thanks for keeping up on the mural board and the user story mapping while you were async. Appreciate it. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about prototypes and MVCs and how we can quickly validate next user-facing functionality as we get into experimental and beta. In the user story map, we sketched out the built-in dashboards as the very first release, and then the ability to create a new dashboard, create a new visualization. Beyond that, and we already started talking a little bit about funnel. We know that we want to go build that based on our own usage and the things that we want to look at. What's next though? I mean, we have this whole grab bag of visualization designer, exporting data, post GA targeted features, AI stuff that we could go build. How can we, as a group, quickly prototype things, get them in front of users, validate, hey, they're going to value this, it solves a problem for them. And hey, as a team, we can go build this thing quickly and actually get it out there so we get real data and not build a bunch of functionality and drag around a bunch of tech debt that nobody's using. That's my biggest concern, is that we're pushing out things that people are using and valuing, and that we take a little bit of time to validate those ideas before we go build them.
Yeah, I think it's going to maybe have to be a mix depending on how confident we are in terms of the level of effort to implement an experiment. And I'm using that word deliberately because if we look at what we're doing as far as kind of our general AI strategy. We are building things out and testing them out in production. But at the same time, I think there's value in having Kevin or someone conduct, like, put together a quick prototype to walk someone through. I don't know what our flow is, but Kevin, you're correct. You can update me, but we used to kind of go through like Figma prototypes, I think, where we would walk the user through like, here's what it would look like. So I think it'd be a level of like, okay, if we take AI, for example, natural language querying, we already have some of the code for that. And in other cases, perhaps we may want to actually build part of it out to actually prove whether it's feasible technically. In that case, we would have to make the decision of like, how much more effort would it be to actually build it out as an experiment, knowing that customers that are using it may disappear, that feature, that experiment. Or is it better where we just say, hey, can we set up like a walkthrough visually to validate whether even customers are going to use this or not?
I think that as we have more AI experiments, there's going to be general knowledge, on the platform of experiments are temporary potentially in nature.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go building, critical business flow around something that has an experiment label on it.
Yeah, and that'll play into how we design it as well. If you want to, continuing on the like hypothetical example of like natural language querying, we also have what we're building at GitLab, like the option to opt in and out of experiments. So if we can design it in such a way that it's not as intrusive, like, you still have the visualization designer, you still have data exploration there. But if you opt into it, then it adds, an additional field where you can start querying it and stuff like that. Then that's something worth exploring too. But it's a fine balance because, we can spend a lot of time thinking about it. And we could have just designed something and walked, not just, but like we could have just walked through a visual representation of it to see if that would actually make sense or not. But we have options, I guess. The short answer to that.
We have options. I want to get us into the habit of bias to action and bias to build, or to get in front of users, whether that's with something that's built in the code base or something that's on Figma, and not spend 6 weeks on building out a clickable prototype or designs and iterating internally a bunch, because we don't get as much value out of that as we do of getting something that's half as good even, or 80% as good in front of a user a lot faster and getting immediate feedback. And knowing, hey, yeah, I would use that. That solves this problem for me today, or I don't see how that's helpful at all. That gives us a lot more to chew on and iterate with than, we kind of like it, we kind of don't, and then get a bunch of people weighing in with an opinion who aren't using product analytics or aren't trying to solve the problems that we want to solve with analytics. So
yeah, what I agree. But at the same time, I think it's just going to be an ongoing conversation. Product engineering and UX are going to have to have together, because in some cases where, like using the AI example, there's a lot of effort ongoing to build like a platform around it so that other groups at GitLab can like get up to speed and implement quicker. But in some cases, we're trying to validate whether or not we can improve the workflow of building custom dashboards through the dashboard and visualization designer. That would probably require a lot of work on the technical side of things, where it's like we're basically re-architecting it from the code, like from the ground up. Then that would make sense to actually build that visual prototype to actually see like, would this make you work faster? So it's like, I'm going to give you the classic answer of like, I agree, but it may depend.
It depends.
It depends.
You've been moonlighting as product overnight there, Dennis?
No.
It depends. That's my favorite answer. It depends.
No, I mean, that's the answer I always gave as an engineer. What do you mean? But what I mean is like, I don't want to discount, like, I think there's still value in like really putting together like a design journey of like, and where in some cases the clickable prototype is actually more valuable, because if we have to end up like rewriting the code to prove out a concept, then that may not be worth it either.
Yeah, I think that's it. Not just is it viable for a user, but is it viable for us to build? This is a super important question, as well as does it move us forward towards our goal of increasing that weekly active user count? So there's a couple of things that we take into account when we start to look at a prototype, regardless of what it looks like. Is it, me sketching something out and handing it to Kevin and Kevin making it look pretty, and then we get together in this meeting and say, hey, yeah, we could go build this, or no, this is going to take us 8 weeks to go build. Oh, okay, well, let's move on to something that's faster to build and has a little bit less value to it.
For sure.
Cool. Okay. I wanted to have that discussion as at least a trio, you and Kevin and I, and I'm glad that Jan is here as well to talk about it. and get ourselves into that habit of moving quickly through validation, whether it's a prototype, something that's built on top of AI platform or whatever, just to bias towards action and getting in front of users as quickly as we can.
Yeah.
Awesome. That looks like the end of the agenda. I don't think we had any action items that we needed to tackle today. I updated the link in sticky items so that we'll have both things that are in design and ready for design as part of that weekly review. Anything else today? All right. Seeing nothing and everyone muted, I'm going to call it. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Cheers.